Welcome to Old Man Blerd. Hi, I'm John, and along with my friend Terrence, we make up a pair of lifelong geeks who happen to be black, over 50, but are certainly nerds first and foremost. The Alpha Geek and the Omega Freak. And we welcome everyone. And by everyone, we mean nerds, blerds, and bleaks, cosplayers and role players, geeks and freaks, Marvel zombies and distinguished competitors, Trekkies, Star Warriors, Batmaniacs, and Spider fans, Warhams, Whovians, AFOLs, adult fans of Legos, Tolkienites, Weeaboos, Supernatural hunters and otakus, Ava geeks, Bro stars and Sistars, Pokemon trainers, Potterheads, Bronies, Whovians, Browncoats, and Scoobies, and all nerd properties in between. Because we are over 50, we've seen a thing or two, and have experience, long experience, with a lot of these properties. So thank you for listening to Old Man Blerd.
Ah, you're connected. Oh, and now you're unmuted. Hello.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
Fine, how are you?
Good, good. Long time no talk to you, like 5 minutes ago.
Ah.
So, yes, so the rant topic for today will be on reboots or variants. But before we get to that, what kind of cool, nerdy, geeky thing are you up to this week or have been up to for the last 7 days?
Still working on my project, as the saying goes.
Oh, okay.
For the first time in months.
Really? So the video game conference, the video game con?
Yes.
Conference convention?
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. Have you gotten some voices locked down?
Not yet.
So it's
I
still
got people approaching.
Oh, okay. Well, approaching's better than not approaching.
Exactly.
All right. What is your tentative date for the video game voice actor con?
October 24th next year.
Of next year. All right. So we'll be keeping up with that. I think geeky stuff that I'm up to. I've been watching One Piece for a while. I'm gonna hopefully get caught up this month because I've got probably about 100 episodes, maybe 200 episodes to catch up, which sounds like a lot, but isn't when you just kind of skip intros and, rehash or summary episodes. So it shouldn't be too bad. But I have been getting into the One Piece card game, which a friend of mine who plays Magic religiously, who goes to Game Heroes to get cards, and I forgot what the other card place is in town. Level 7 games, I think, is the other place that he goes in Colorado to get his cards. And he said that the One Piece game is really, really fun. So I'd been picking them up just to collect the cards, but getting the rules, it looks like it's going to be pretty neat. So I would strongly recommend getting a couple of decks because it's going to be huge, I think. It's starting to get popular, and so it's kind of like entering Pokemon. And if you were entering Pokemon years ago at the very beginning, and so cards are starting to go up in price. I've been collecting them, like I say, because of the artwork. It's very reminiscent of Oda's artwork in the manga. I think some of them might be actually cut from the manga, but and so yeah, but they're starting to kind of sell. I saw a whole bunch of packs at Walmart, and I was like, oh, neat. It looks like no one's really discovered it. Went back the next day, gone. all of them were gone. And it used to be, I guess, even just 2-3 months ago, you could go in and you could get as many as you want, and they'd still be there. But so I think they're on their 5th run of packs. Their 5th set of boosters, I think.
Wow.
So
pretty cool.
Yeah, so check it out. I definitely think that it's gonna be the new hotness in a year or two, and people will be like, "Oh my gosh, Remember when those were everywhere and now they're like nowhere? But that is
Yes,
the yeah, yeah, that's how it happens. I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh, next week, this later on this week, they're gonna have the Pokemon DLC where they're gonna bring in all the old starters to the Scarlet and Violet game, as well as all the legendaries.
oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, so you get to bring in all of the fun little starters you had from way back when into the new game, which is always fun. I'll bring my man Incineroar back all the way through uh, to the new game, and then it makes competitive Pokemon a whole crazy thing.
Right,
But
because you have the one that you're very familiar with, like your right hand.
oh yeah, yeah, you know exactly what moves they have, and you know sometimes the meta changes, and it's like, oh, my poor little Pokemon isn't viable and competitive. But a lot of times it stays about the same. But there's some new mons that are in Pokemon that are pretty interesting, and I'd like to see what they do with the old mons, which they will be doing, I believe, I guess it's Wednesday of this week,
Hmm.
maybe Thursday is when that DLC drops. But and that's it for me in the world of geekdom, I guess.
Oh, I've got one more thing. I went and saw Godzilla -1.
Oh, and how is that?
Excellent.
Ah, that will actually lead us into our topic. So, you thought was it better than the last few or just as good?
I think it was good as the first one from 1954.
Oh, Gojira. So you think it's as good as Gojira, the original?
Hmm.
Is so? And what years does it take place?
Right after, towards the end of World War II, 1945 until 1954, just before Godzilla came out.
Oh, so it actually is literally as close to a reboot as you could possibly get.
Right.
Huh. Well, let's jump into the topic then. We'll shake your reboots, your rebooties, quaking in our reboots. So that brings us to the subject of reboots. And this Godzilla -1, why is it -1, by the way?
Because it takes place right after World War II. So Japan can't get no lower. Here comes Godzilla to take it the next level down.
Oh, okay. So it's like we've lost World War II, and now there's this this kaiju running
Exactly.
around. Oh
Exactly.
man.
I mean,
Um,
just imagine having a super bad day.
yes, a very super bad day. Um, and it's in color, I'm assuming, although they could make the artistic choice to make it in black and white, but it's in color, right?
It's in color, but it has just enough gray that it looks like the Technicolor from the 50s.
Oh, okay. So they actually, huh, that's interesting. That's an interesting choice. Is it CGI or is it a man in a
Both.
suit? L-
Both.
So it's a man in a suit and CGI.
Hmm.
Holy smokes. Is this by Toho or is there even such a thing as Toho at this point?
It's by Toho. It is by Toho.
Oh, okay.
And what was interesting is the guy who wrote it, also directed, also was in charge of visual effects. So this was his passion. This was his child.
Okay, so because there was Shin Godzilla,
Right.
then there was Godzilla, which would made the trilogy of Godzilla, Godzilla King of Monsters, Godzilla versus King Kong.
Right.
And then the upcoming, soon to be upcoming, the Godzilla Kong, the New Empire.
Right.
Did that already come out?
No, that comes out March 15th next year.
Okay. All right. Your kaiju knowledge is strong, my brother. I have to admit, I have, I mean, the 1998 Godzilla, not having it, but like Shin Godzilla and Godzilla King of Monsters and Godzilla and Kong, I loved those. I just thought those were great. And then of course I have a soft spot for the old Godzilla in the rubber suit. But you
Well,
feel like, go ahead.
going in the direction of 98, only reason I interjected because you said the 98. This is a good example of where they had a little trend
Mm-hmm.
about the 80s or the 90s where basically the actors got older, so they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do sequels in the true sense. So they were doing it with animation, and or they were too expensive as in the original actors. Take your pick. But they
Mm-hmm.
chose someone who sounded similar,
Hmm.
and they did a Fox Godzilla cartoon that takes place literally at the end of 1998's Godzilla, and it got
Oh.
many positive reviews from kaiju fans
Mm-hmm.
because it was basically done by people who actually cared about the product, if you will.
Hmm. Well, I
And
mean, and I think that the thing is that the kaiju thing always cycles back around. Do you think it relates to sort of geopolitical sort of situations? Like if we're ever kind of close to war, it seems like Godzilla sort of raises his spiked head.
well, that's
Uh,
one of the reasons. The other reason kaiju are around is because it is a form of respect for something bigger than you.
Sure. The whole notion of there's just this oversized, like it's a little less street crime monster like the vampires and the werewolves. It's just this huge thing that is just obliterating cities. And I mean, as a kid, I just love those, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you place this Godzilla? Because Godzilla has had, I guess, ultimately multiple reboots, or maybe as you like to maybe say variants. I mean, because not, I mean, many of them were Toho, so I guess you could kind of consider all the Toho Godzillas as being not reboots. They're just, sequels and that kind of thing. But
Or
by the
another
time,
story.
yeah, but I think by 1998, when Hollywood got to it, that's a different Godzilla altogether. And that would be a
Exactly.
reboot. And then the Godzilla that then launched into Godzilla King of Monsters, Godzilla versus Kong, that's another reboot from the Godzilla of 1998. How do you,
Exactly.
so, okay, so maybe let me back up. So, what in the Godzilla world, what's your favorite one of these, of the reboots? I mean, because the original is the original and you can't touch that, but you know,
Well, I like
the
the King of
reboots.
Monsters. The Godzilla Legendary. I like them because, as you said, I was there at the beginning.
Hmm.
And, and also, when you're a fan of any genre, it's appreciative when others embrace it too. Like you feel about 98, I was just glad to see him on the screen. But there are many who picked and choose and, you know, had reasons that it wasn't as good. And they were right. I can't argue. So the stuff they did, like the little Godzilla children's scene, was basically Jurassic Park.
Hmm.
You know, it would have
Now,
worked.
has Godzilla has Godzilla typically been male? I can't remember. I know in that 1998, wasn't Godzilla a female?
Godzilla has basically mostly been male, but every now and then has been asexual, as in what is necessary to reproduce
Sure,
and
and
then
that's
turns
that's
back
the
into men.
that's what the Godzilla 1998 was, is that it
Exactly.
was reproducing. And I don't think it was necessarily any kind of sexism, but it just was kind of like, maybe not handled that great. Now in this Godzilla minus one, because this would kind of be a reboot, um, do they have the same sound effects in it? The
Yes. Yeah, they have their own version of it. Yes, it does.
the own
The
version, or
biggest
the
thing,
or the classic sound, but I guess it's kind of like
it
the
was,
Doctor Who
a
soundtrack.
variation of just like the Doctor Who soundtrack. The biggest thing they did though is how in the legendary Godzilla has his tail slightly light up on the spikes
Hmm.
before he lets loose his breath.
Hmm.
This one, Godzilla actually is like cocking a gun. Each one is fins start getting in place.
Huh. So they kind of sprout, they
Yeah,
sort of
yeah, they
sprout out
sprout
of his
when he's
back.
getting ready to. When he's getting ready, I mean, they're there already, but they become more predominant. He has a center one that raises up all the way straight through.
That's got to be one of the most iconic sort of power-ups in all of media. is him
Oh
is
yeah.
him getting ready to do his breath weapon. I mean, yeah, I think that's why they saved it pretty close to the end for that first Godzilla
Mm.
reboot.
Oh yeah, we were all like, oh my.
Right. It was just like, oh my goodness gracious, he's breathing. And they got the color right of it, and everything. It was just like, oh man.
Mm-hmm. Versus the
So
50s where it looked like you shot a spray bottle, like aerosol spray out of toy's mouth.
yeah.
No, I did that.
Right. So now let's broaden it out a little bit. So, I mean, this reboot, pretty good. You feel like this was strong. You think this was as
Yes,
strong as the last batch of Godzilla movies and as strong as the first one?
yes.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty bold statement. Now, there
You gotta
are,
understand, Godzilla is like choosing a steak. You want it medium, well done, or rare.
mhm.
It's the same thing. You have those who want it super realistic, and then those who want to be fantastic, and then you want those who want it just for the comedy or just for the fun of it. And there are those who are always going to try to dominate one way or the other. And you're just going, I just want to watch it. That's me. I'm just one of those. I just enjoy it because when I was a kid, that was my piece.
Sure. I mean, I think when in the world of Godzilla, King Kong, and other kaiju, Godzilla pretty much is the king of the monsters. I don't think it gets better than that. I mean, Kong is okay, and arguably Kong would have been considered the first kaiju because, that
It
first
was.
King Kong with Fay Ray was that 1939?
Yes. Or was it 33? One of them.
It was in the 30s for sure. And
Yes.
and that's pretty powerful. Uh so now broadening the conversation. Okay, so other reboots right now, I think Marvel's getting ready to redo Blade. They're getting ready to redo Fantastic Four, and there's a new Willy Wonka as well. And I guess it's Timothy Chalamet. I'm not sure if I pronounced his name there.
Yes.
I think that's how
Right.
it's pronounced, sort of. And he wasn't wanting to do it, but I guess the opening song sort of was one of the things that convinced him. And they've done Willy Wonka before with Johnny Depp, and oh man, that was not good in my opinion.
But they
That
were
was
going more the dark, dark way in that one.
well, and that's fine, but I think that Gene Wilder really knocked that out of the ballpark as a
Well,
role.
he set the standard. He set the
He,
standard.
I mean, I arguably just don't even need to see another one. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, the story still holds up. Roald Dahl. I mean, it's still a good story, but I just don't know if I don't know. I think he captured a certain level of the darkness, the certain mystery, weirdness of being a child and having to interface with adults, and all of that. And also, maybe, with a little bit of moral lesson of don't be a brat. Um, but I feel like this one maybe is trying to say something against sort of corporations, which, everything in pop culture is kind of saying, maybe corporations are bad. Not that it's moving the needle any.
Well, especially since corporations are putting it up.
Yeah, right. The corporations are bad. Brought to you by Disney. Brought to you by Amazon. It's like, well, you can't really bite too hard on the hand that feeds you. Um, but how do you feel about reboots in general? And you were kind of, you know, sort of proposing that maybe we should look at these in terms of variants. And for those of you that don't collect comic books, every now and then there's a variant cover that typically is like, they only make one out of every 25 copies, or one out of every 50, or one out of every 100 copies. And they end up being rare, and they end up going up in value. So how do you think of these what's your overall opinion of reboots?
I think it truly depends. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, Lord of the Rings is a very good example. Lord of
Mm-hmm.
the Rings was a cartoon when we were children, both of us, in the 70s, by your friend who did Wizards.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Ralph Bakshi. Mm-hmm.
And they did it, and it was very well done, but they didn't have the special effects. to do up to par what Peter Jackson did.
Mm-hmm.
So we could say it was a reboot, or we could say it was a film of the times. I mean, it's the same as King Kong, as you mentioned, 1933 versus 1977. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that again, was it a reboot or was it a variation of the time versus Peter Jackson? It is in the Alphas 2000s. So I mean, I think reboots sometimes have a couple of qualities. Sometimes they really are trying to just start all over. Sometimes the actors or time has changed, so they have to try to adjust. I mean, even if the actor has died or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, even if they won't come back, conflict of interest or whatever. And then sometimes is they're trying to do a story just in that universe, just in
Sure.
that world. Like you were talking about the Wonka. Okay, we get the origin of how he got to it, even though they basically are just playing in Dali's world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I
Well,
mean,
I'm sort of lukewarm on reboots. I mean, I've watched plenty of them. I mean, and there have been plenty of them that I've enjoyed because, like I said, I enjoyed those last few Godzilla movies, and they're absolutely reboots. Um, but there's a part of, and I think that it's getting to this sort of notion of archetypes in a way where, you know, these worlds or these characters, we need to see them over and over again. But at the same time, I kind of also want to see new properties. I want to see new creations. I don't want to always have to go, okay, let's do this again. But some of them are just too good. I mean, you can't, it would be nice to see what the Marvel Cinematic Universe does with Blade, because I tend to
well,
think that their writing, their filming, their budgets are just a bit bigger than the original Blade. So they probably will do a decent job of it, you know? But at the same time, it's like, well, why can't we just sort of make new properties? Why can't we just make new, do new characters? Godzilla, I think, is probably in some ways the king of the reboots in a way, because I don't know of anything that's been remade by different studios as much as Godzilla. I mean, do you know of anything?
well,
I don't.
yeah. Well, I mean, a good example of what you're saying is one of the times that is like I mentioned before in previous podcasts is that you can choose what one you want to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
In example, because you were talking about don't need a new property. Well, cybernauting, exploring the cybernet, internet.
Mm-hmm.
I came across a guy, I don't know his first name offhand, but his name is Valentine. And he has a thing for doing serious Popeye.
Hmm.
As a he does Popeye himself. He's Popeye.
Oh
But he
wow.
does it no comedy as a serious fan film. So it could be argued that his variation is better than Robin Williams because he makes him a serious character.
Hmm. Well, and Popeye, that's speaking of reboots that may have not gone over well. Popeye, that was really, it did not do well, I think. I think it had a huge budget. But I thought it was perfectly cast and I enjoyed it as a kid. I even enjoyed it enough to be like, I'm gonna get the book, and I totally fanboyed out about it for a bit because I liked Popeye. I mean,
Exactly.
I just liked Popeye. I always thought Popeye was an interesting character. And I mean, he's got to have been an influence on any number of anime for sure. I think Frankie in One Piece is very much influenced by Popeye, just the look of him. And it's just cola instead of spinach. I think that just the whole notion of the power up, like we were talking about with Godzilla, Popeye has a power up. He's like a magical girl. He transforms after he gets his spinach. I thought that was great. But that reboot really did not do well. It really didn't. It was one of those things that I think for a bit damaged Robin Williams as a property for a bit.
Well, yeah, because people weren't prepared for the musical. They weren't prepared for that. I mean, I enjoyed it, still enjoy it because
Mm-hmm.
you under. That's one thing you guys understand as fanboys. if you enjoy it for what it is, 90% of stuff that are condemned aren't condemnable. If you enjoy
Hmm.
it for what it is, and that's the key
Hmm.
word, what it is, not what it aspired to be, not what they wanted it to be, but what it is.
Hmm.
And then some of the stuff is just terrible because it destroys the very essence of the original property and what they were trying to do. I mean, the best example is Aliens.
Hmm.
When they did Prometheus, okay, we had the engineers, and then all of a sudden you
And
have a human creation, David, the android, actually messed them up. That was unacceptable, right down to him also killing the doctor that supported him. Because I
sure.
mean, it's just, okay, you would think he would at least take care of her, maybe kill everybody else, but take care of her. But he didn't do that at all.
Huh.
And those little micro emotions can go against reboots also.
Well, yeah, I mean, because that another, Aliens Prometheus, that's another reboot because different directors, different actors, the whole nine yards. Um, I think that there's plenty of potential to mine more, you know, interesting stories out of a character or a universe, and that's why reboots come to pass. I think the reason why they come to pass for producers is that they're like, people know this character, let's just redo them and have and we'll have a built-in fan base so we can always make our money back. um Popeye, unsuccessful reboot, but the Spider-Man series, arguably a fairly successful reboot, and they seem to reboot that one over and over again. This newest one is, with No Way Home and Far From Home, all of those Spider-Mans, as well as this sort of Spider-Verse animated stuff, fairly successful. People are enjoying it. I enjoy it. Those are decent. I remember the jump from Tobey Maguire to Andrew McCarthy, Andrew
Garfield.
Garfield, Andrew Garfield. Ugh, had a brain fart there. Um, and I thought Andrew Garfield was really good, but I didn't think that the stuff around him was particularly good, especially the second movie. Um, I I just that goes into the whole Electro thing, and cast whatever actor you want, but I don't know. It didn't work for me particularly, but it had nothing to do with it being Jamie Foxx. Well, maybe it did a little bit, Jamie Foxx, just that I didn't particularly enjoy Jamie Foxx. But I enjoyed Jamie Foxx and other things, but not that. Um, but those are fairly successful reboots. So, I mean, I guess Hollywood and Toho are not going to stop making reboots as long as they're successful and people go see them.
Well, also the reboots have a couple of different qualities and flaws. Like for instance, when Fox was still a minor player, Fox Channel, Fox Network,
Hmm.
and we're doing the RoboCop movies, you know, after Peter Weller didn't do them, they rebooted by having a different character actor take over, the part, and that's fine.
Hmm.
So we could say, but see, those are one of those where it's a matter of paying Peter a lot of money, especially for a part he didn't want to do again,
Yeah.
versus having a different actor. And also, sometimes you could say some of the reboots are sandboxing, as you said, in the same universe, just a different character, different reactions, different area. I mean, Lower Decks in Star Trek is a good example. It's in the same Star Trek universe,
Hmm.
but we're getting a whole story from engineering. We're
Sure.
not even really up in the command where we usually are. So it's still in the same universe. So it's not so much a reboot sometimes. It's just you're in the same universe.
You're playing in the same sandbox. You,
Exactly.
Now, there's something that gets rebooted over and over again, and it just doesn't seem to work, and it's Judge Dredd. Although the most recent Judge Dredd was real well made. It was basically, any, any sort of movie where someone has to start at the first floor and work their way up. And those are always typically pretty good movies. But it just, for whatever reason, audiences never really respond to it. I think it's probably because Judge Dredd, as a 2000 AD British character, comic book character, has always struggled in the United States anyway.
There you go. You hit it on the head exactly. It's a foreign property that our culture doesn't readily embrace.
No,
I mean,
no.
it's just that simple. It has nothing to do with the arc. I mean, there are those, like we say about Godzilla. We say Star Trek and Star Wars are the biggest fandoms. But when they talk about Godzilla, they'll sit there and say, well, it didn't make its money, but it has a loyal, steadfast audience.
Sure.
And then another group that swings in and swings out. They do and don't like it, but they go take a peek. It's the
Hmm.
same thing about Judge Dredd. There are those who love Judge Dredd no matter what,
Hmm.
and they'll just swing in and swing out. The rest of
Yeah,
us.
I think Judge Dredd it just never quite caught on here. I think that we just have too many characters that are little similar. I mean, Wolverine, your Punisher, your dark and gritty guys that kill a lot. Um, but I think the problem is that the dystopian universe doesn't quite make sense for people for whatever reason. It'd be hard to get behind a policeman in a police state.
Well, the news hasn't helped in that part. Let's be honest there.
No, probably not. It's like, oh, Judge Dredd. Um, I'm trying to think of some other reboots that have been fairly
Well,
that
well, here's one for you: Charlie's Angels. Charlie's Angels, the one with Drew Barrymore, added a credence of seriousness to the
Mhm.
TV because they did a connection, of having John Forsythe still be Charlie.
Sure.
And so they actually added a credibility to it versus Elizabeth Banks. Why you can tell she's a fan and is not a bad one, but it is a variant.
Hmm. They're doing another Charlie's Angels aside from the Drew Barrymore one, and
Yeah, they did it. They did it a couple years ago. It was with Kristen Stewart.
huh. I that one just escaped me completely. Well,
And it was
and
based on Elizabeth
that's a
Banks.
whole subgenre of reboots variants is the 70s show. There was the Starsky and Hutch with Ben Stiller, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the ones that's one that happens is they like to make them into a comedy rather than recognize the seriousness of it. That's why the Drew Barrymore worked. Is they instead of making it comedic, they made it into a seriousness about it.
Sure, they made them actual sort of spies of a sort.
Exactly. And I mean, Fantasy Island, it could be argued that it was good or bad, but it kind of gave the origin as far as the mystic nature of the island,
Sure.
when they did it, versus the original two TV movies. It was just a guy that was creating your fantasies, but like he'll put on makeup or he'll pay people to behave a certain way to create the illusion, you know,
Hmm.
just to change your life. It wasn't no mysticism involved in the first two movies. It's when they
It's
decided to make it into a series that they've made it mystic.
nice. Well, I'm gonna take one brief break just for a second, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. All right, we're
Cool.
back. We're back.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, I guess now that you mentioned the whole notion of the sandbox, I understand the reboot variant a little bit better because I guess, I mean, like Blade Runner. Blade Runner, that's a
Mhm.
really interesting, excuse me, that's a really interesting universe. And so the newest Blade Runner with Ryan Gosling, I thought was great. I mean, it was really, really well done. And that was, they were playing in the same sandbox. It wasn't a reboot so much as, hey, we want to explore this world in a different way. And I thought it was great. And so, I mean, I would love to see more of that. It seems as though the reboots tend to be just or predominantly movies, don't they? There don't seem to be TV shows very often.
Well, sometimes when they do the reboot, also it is we have a property we can make money with it, as we said about Fantasy Island. Like for instance, if they don't advertise, which they'll first complain about, well, nobody's watching it. If you don't advertise, how are we gonna know it's on?
That's true.
You
And
know,
I think
so
some
they
things
like it.
really do get punished by not advertising. Although, you probably, I mean, I used to think that there wasn't that much impact with advertising, but if you don't know something's out, I mean, there are definitely Star Wars things that have happened that I've missed because I haven't seen the advertising. I didn't get a chance to check out Andor. Um,
Right.
but I hear it's good.
Right.
I thought Obi-Wan was great, but then what brought me back there was, well, it was Obi-Wan. So I was definitely going to be on board for it. If you like the actor too, it helps, you know.
Well, yeah. And if you stay on the pulse, somehow, your news feed, they'll let you know.
Yeah, they'll let
But
you know it's
still,
like, oh, new Star Wars. So those aren't so the Star Wars television shows, they're not really, but they're by no means really reboots. They're sandboxing. They're just exploring
yeah,
the
or
universe.
continuances of the story, just a different path.
Yeah, it's like you have The Mandalorian, which was great. I
The
haven't
bad
seen it.
bad.
Yeah, I haven't seen Ashoka. I
No, I
haven't
haven't
seen
either.
I haven't seen that one yet. And that's I from what I hear, I think it starts slow, but all of them have started slow. I mean, Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan starts really slow, but then I got to see the Darth Vader of my childhood imagination be where he was actually terrifying. It was,
Mhm.
I mean, someone with telekinesis, which essentially, Jedi abilities are. It's like sort of your Phoenix Force type, powers. He did some crazy stuff in Obi-Wan. I was like, oh, that's the Darth Vader that I was thinking of when I was 10.
Oh, I understand completely. That's the way I felt when he fought Darth Vader. I'm like, oh my God, this is the Obi-Wan that says, go F around and find out.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's like I was like, wow. I mean, there was some stuff in Obi-Wan where I was like, yeah. Well, the end of Rogue One, where he's just going through and just really
decimating.
decimating people. I mean, spoilers for those who haven't seen Obi-Wan, spoilers. Yeah, he's like just walking through the street and breaks that kid's neck or whatever, you know, just walking down because he had the audacity to cross his path. It's like, yeah, Darth Vader's, he has committed multiple infanticides.
So
This
it
is
doesn't bother him the same.
Yeah, he's not a good dude. And the idea that you could have thought that he was just sort of this whiny, bratty character, the way that the prequels sort of made him, it was like, and they rehabbed Hayden Christensen too. In Obi-Wan, which I was really happy about because I think a lot of the actors that were in the prequels, they just got raked over the coals for all of it. Uh,
Oh,
somewhat
definitely.
somewhat unnecessarily because it was the writing, it wasn't the acting.
Well, not just that. We also got to understand that the time period, the awe of being Star Wars, the not being, being so young. Now they're older to go, well, that actually is a good thing. It's like you hear about Superboy in
Hmm.
the 80s. There are two actors who played Superboy in the Superboy TV show. And the first one, he was so full of himself that they fired him. And he'll
Wow.
tell you now that was the biggest mistake he did in his life. And he doesn't hate that he was a Superboy. Matter of fact, he did a fan film cartoon that was like 2.5 minutes long. But time has humbled him. It makes him appreciate what he had. And that's the
you,
way I look at Hayden when it comes to him in Star Wars.
yeah, time has healed all wounds there, I think. Yeah. That just you mentioned Superboy, and I just realized I might have to change my view on who actually is the king of reboots. I think Superman is the king of reboots more than any single property. Okay, because he gets rebooted routinely in the comics. And at this point, we have the George Reeves Superman. We have the Superman that was before him, which I'm not sure what his name
Kurt
was.
Aldwin. Kurt
Okay, very
Aldwin.
good. Look at you winning Jeopardy. And then after that, you had Christopher Reeves, and then you had well, let's see, what after that?
Brandon.
Brandon Ruth.
Brandon.
Yep.
Yes.
You had Dean Cain on the television
Yep.
show. And then you had who's the newest Superman that they just canceled?
Henry.
Not Henry
Henry.
Cavill, but Cavill, but
Yeah, him.
well, but I'm talking
Him.
about the one on the television show.
Oh, that was Dean. This part's canceled.
No, that was not Dean Kane, the other one. The one that
Tom,
was the one that had like the 5 o'clock shadow all the time.
like I said, Tom,
Tom, what was his name?
Tom Welling.
No, that's
Yeah.
Smallville, Tom. That's Smallville, but that
Right,
is the
right.
reboot. That's another one. No, there was the one that just like in the last 2 years,
That's
Superman
why
and
I said it was
Lois.
Henry.
Well,
Oh, Tyler.
yes, on the television show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tyler.
So I think considering how many names we just mutilated or barely remembered.
We haven't even forgot about Tim Daly,
Yep,
the cartoon.
yep. Superman, the animated series. I mean, so I think Superman is runaway king of the reboots because then, I mean, if you're talking about the Superman of the comics, you have the old Golden Age Superman. Then you have the Kurt Swan Superman. Then you have the Byrne Superman. You had a Kirby Superman that had the Kurt Swan face because they wouldn't allow Jack Kirby, to do a Super Kirby Superman. Then you had like mullet Superman. Then you had
Yeah,
Superman with the electric powers, Superman
yeah,
Blue and Superman Red, I think.
yes,
Then you had All Star Superman by Grant Morrison. You had Superman of All Seasons, which was Tim Sale.
right.
So, I mean, Superman might actually be the king of reboots.
Well, the thing is, they try to, I quote, make him identify with the generation. And that the problem depends on where you go with. Like the comics, it makes sense. Okay, you got an old property, so you're trying to get it so it's relevant. Okay, but when it comes to the movies, it's more of the bean counters. Like, well, we wanted to be like this, and they don't respect the property they're with. Like Godzilla, you can't have a Godzilla movie where he sits there and literally walks through Tokyo and there's not a building destroyed.
Sure.
Just ain't right.
Sure. And I think that I thought the Brandon Ruth Superman, I thought it was great. I didn't like him having a kid. That was just me. I don't mind Superman in the comics getting to that point. Do you know what I mean? Because they have a built-in story, but movie Superman, I don't need him to be like Batman, Superman. I mean, movie Batman, where we always have to see his mom's pearls drop to the ground. We have to see his parents get murdered every single time. But
Well, yeah, Uncle Ben, how poor Uncle Ben. That was the only thing. Only thing with Tom was that it was Aunt May this time. It was totally threw everybody for a loop. We weren't
now
prepared for Aunt May to be killed this time.
now I think and I know I'm mutilating his name. This is where I'm super old man blurred. Henry Cavill.
Yes,
Cavill?
Cavill.
Cavill. Well, I think I've read his name more than I've heard it. That might be
Right.
why. He really got, I think, messed over. He got messed over in The Witcher and he got messed over in Superman. And I think the writing messed him over in Superman. And I think that him wanting to stick to the original source material in The Witcher messed him over for The Witcher. But The Witcher
Well, the
was
problem
good.
is, I hate to say this, is that he unfortunately is one of the kings of geekdom. Him and Stephen Colbert. And
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's why I want to get his name correct, for goodness sakes. I mean, the guy's into Warhammer, he makes his own computers, he plays Superman. I mean, aside from Benedict Cumberbatch, um, you know, I don't know of anybody who's been in more nerd properties than him.
not
I
in
mean,
recent years.
now no one can touch Benedict Cumberbatch
I was going to say
because
Christopher Lee, but
yeah, Christopher Lee for sure. But because Christopher Lee, okay, here's how it goes. Christopher Lee was in Dracula, all those Dracula movies. He was in Lord of the Rings, and he was in Star Wars, right?
and James
But
Bond.
and James Bond. But Benedict Cumberbatch has been in. He's been in The Hobbit. He's
Mm.
Doctor Strange. So was he in any? He was in Star Trek. He played Khan in Star Trek, the movie.
And Sherlock, as in Sherlock
He's
Holmes, the original detective.
he played. Yeah, sorry about my phone, ladies and gentlemen. He played. Played Sherlock. So okay, so if he ends up in a DC movie, he will have been in everything. What about video games? Has he been in a video game property?
I'm not sure, but he's one of those that if he is in the video game, more than likely it's more of his look than his voice. In other words, they took his image and imposed it, like when they
Sure.
did a lot of the Doctor Strange or Marvel pre-Disney,
Hmm.
and they were doing him as Doctor Strange during the merger. They were doing his Doctor Strange. They used his face on some of the properties.
Hmm. Well, but he's been so. I mean, if you've been, my feeling is if you've been in the Lord of the Rings, has he been in a Star Wars? He hasn't been in a Star Wars though.
If he is, he's like a lot of them that are these days, is that they're hidden behind a mask, and we don't know until later.
Sure, but he has not been publicly that I know of in a Star Wars. I think that if you want your super nerd cred, like a Felicia Day type thing, if you want your super nerd cred, you've got to be in a DC, a Marvel, a fantasy thing, and I think that then you would really you and maybe a horror film of some sort. Then you'd really, I think you'd be crossing all of the
I think we
T's.
and we want to talk about geekdom. I think we forgot the ultimate reboot property. Even
Yes.
though even though it's not truly geekdom, but as we said in one of our previous podcasts, there is a different form of geek.
Sure, there's all of it's geek. Ultimately, if
Girl.
you like anything too much and want to and pay fealty to it in some way and wave the flag for it, you're probably a geek. That's why a lot of sports people are geeks. But you were going to say,
Christmas Carol.
yeah, that's true. And I have to admit, there's more than a few Christmas carols that I enjoy. I like Scrooged with Bill Murray. I do like the Muppets one. I do like the Muppets one. I'm trying to think what else. I like the Patrick Stewart one. I like the George
Albert
C.
Finney one,
Yeah, I like the.
or
I think it's the George C. Scott.
George C.
Or
Scott and Albert Finney. And then they
y-
had the original one that came out in 1908, and the guy played both the ghosts. It's like,
yeah,
wow, who
there's
set this?
there are a lot of Christmas carols. So yeah, that is okay. So maybe
I mean,
because
that's the thing
that
because
might be
they
the king.
incorporate in TV shows. They incorporate in TV shows too.
That's
They have a character that's grumpy sometimes. Like, okay, they give them the Christmas Carol for their Christmas episode.
sure they get too drunk on the eggnog, and next thing you know, they have the visit of the three spirit
Mm-hmm.
ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. That's true. Mr. Magoo, I think has
Mm-hmm.
there was a Mr. Magoo one, a few
Daffy
cartoon
Duck.
one. There's yes, the Daffy Duck one. I'm pretty sure. I don't remember the Daffy Duck one though. I know there had to
So
have been one.
yeah, he was the owner of a department store, and Porky Pig basically played Cratchit.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, that checks out. Okay, so yeah, so actually, the king of reboots before Superman, before Godzilla, is probably A Christmas Carol.
Because I mean, like I said, they even incorporate in TV shows. And you want to go to Christmas reboot, we'll say that and It's a Wonderful Life. Because for crying out loud, they did it in Smallville and they did it in Highlander.
They do they they do uh It's a Wonderful Life fairly frequently in shows. They have never remade the movie though. And frankly, I'm
No.
glad they haven't because I think Jimmy Stewart knocked it out of the park. That is my favorite Christmas movie. This will probably upload this episode just before Christmas. So I guess it's fitting that we end on a Christmas note. We ended on a Christmas note. Christmas, the king of all reboot holidays.
Well, yeah, you can say the Nativity too. They redo that all the time.
That's true. That's true. Do they have a Star Wars nativity? I feel like they
They had a
probably
Christmas
do.
special. They had a Christmas special that we all died, but it was because that was the first appearance of Boba Fett. So hey, that's what saved it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there you go. So yes, Christmas, specifically A Christmas Carol, is the king of all reboots, followed by Superman,
Mm-hmm.
then Godzilla. I don't know who's next.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Spider-Man probably is after that. Spider-Man, Batman.
I would say James Bond.
Huh. Well,
If you
if we're
think of
going
all the
by,
actors
do you
from James
count
Life.
that as a reboot though? Just having a different actor? I guess you kind of have to, right?
Well, for a couple of reasons. I mean, they might use the same M, you know what I mean? Because they use the same M for Sean Connery and Roger Moore.
Sure.
but the style of the story changes too.
That's true. So James Bond has, I mean, it's almost like Doctor Who at this point. There's got to be, I don't know. There's George Lazenby, there's Roger Moore, there's Timothy Dalton, there's uh, Daniel Craig, there's Sean
Pierce Brosnan.
Connery, huh?
Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan. That's right. I was expecting more out of the Pierce Brosnan Bond because people wanted him to play Bond for forever. But
Well, also you got to think about it. If he had played it when people wanted to, he'd probably be one of the greatest ones. But writers change, motivations change. I'm talking about behind the scenes, and then you're talking about uh, the producer dying or his daughter taking on. Not even going that route. I'm talking about others. As we said before, the villain in a lot of fandom is bean counters.
that's true. The accountants. First thing we do is hang all the accountants. No, I think it's lawyers though. In Henry VIII, I think that was in one of the
Yes.
Shakespeare's plays.
Well,
Well,
here's one for you. Speaking of accountants, here's
sure.
one for you. It's kind of off the subject, but we have it for next time, but to a degree it's true. They talked about having AI,
Hmm.
and should we or should we not have AI actors? Here's one for you. We used to, and they still do it once in a while. I couldn't tell you his name to save my life, but if you look around, you will find him. He died about 20 years ago. He was 102 then, as in he was 103 when he died, but he was 102 getting his Lifetime Achievement Award for always playing authoritative accounting figures. That's what brought it to mind.
Hmm.
And he was like, I'm still around. I don't have Alzheimer's. I'm willing to work, and nobody will call him.
Oh, that's too bad.
So, so my thing is, this is one of those cases that I think AI would be okay
Yeah, I think he'd
to
probably
have him.
have him be the bean counter. It was kind of
Yeah,
like the back as is this the one thing I didn't mention was the death of Norman Lear, who I think was an immense talent in terms of
hmm
television and in terms of representation, because I think before him you didn't really have much, and then you had All in the Family and the Jeffersons and Good Times and gosh, what else did he Sanford and Son, I think maybe, and Chico and the Man, possibly.
yes, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, he single-handedly hired all of the black people for the 70s television shows. But and those were great shows. I thought they were great shows. A lot of them you couldn't probably play today because whoo, they would get spicy. There would be some takes. They had some hot takes. But gotta give it up, pour one out for Norman Lear. But yeah, there's that. And you were saying
Well,
that, hmm?
no, go ahead. I was saying
I,
what?
I was just going to say that, so we've got a whole bunch of reboots. I'd love to hear what you all out there, ladies and gentlemen, um, feel about reboots. Some of your favorite reboots, some of your least favorite reboots. Hit us up at drakestorm@gmail.com for Terrence. You can hit me up at urbandharma8, urbandharma with the number 8 at gmail.com, or that's so quantum at gmail.com. Yeah, let us know what you think of reboots, and I still think that the king of all reboots at this point is absolutely A Christmas Story. And with that, if this gets uploaded just before the Christmas season, Christmas Day, have a happy one out there, and don't be a stranger.
Just be strange.
Take care until next week.